All right, thank you. Thank you, Kumar, for inviting me to share some time with this amazing work. I was just listening to the choir before and the song about being Australian. And it sent a shiver up my spine because over the last couple of years I've been reflecting a lot about what it is to be Australian. Because I wasn't born an Australian, I was born in Sri Lanka. And even today, Sri Lanka is going through some very difficult times. I was talking to a friend last night, and outside his office, there were people being beaten with sticks and poles and bats, people being set upon, people attacking his staff in his office. And he said that when these people were being taken to the hospital, they were being pulled off the ambulances and being beaten again. So the country's going through some difficult times. And when I was a kid too, it was the same thing. Sri Lanka was going through a war when I was a kid. And as I was growing up, I saw people being burnt alive. I saw people being beheaded, shot. We lived through corruption. We saw poverty. We saw the most difficult things that humanity has to go through. But on my 10th birthday, we migrated here to Australia. My dad was an engineer, so we migrated through the skilled migration program, and it was a whole different world. And I suspect many of us in this room have escaped or left similar circumstances to come to this land. And from the day I moved here, I've felt very lucky to be living in a place like this. Yesterday I was driving down from Gold Coast, and even just looking around at the beautiful scenery, looking at the road that I get to drive down, and all the things that I get to enjoy after leaving work at the university and at the hospital that I work in, I was just marveling at how privileged I am to live in an economic powerhouse where a lot of people in this world don't get to enjoy the same privileges that we do, even by virtue of sitting in this room right here, right now, sharing this time together. And I think that's something to take stock of. So life was good, and I became very appreciative of this new land that I became a part of. And I became even more appreciative of the fact that a fair go is something that is a part of the culture, and that everyone believes in the value of a fair go. So my family too made a life in this country, and we moved around, and we started to feel at home and started to feel like we're a part of the people here. But in 2010, when I turned 25, my life took another turn. I was involved in a car accident on a wet day, not too similar to this, where I was driving down the highway and my car aquaplaned. It spun and spun and spun, drove up an embankment, drove back down, and then started flipping through the air, nose to tail. When the car finally landed after the violent experience that I had, it was dead silent. I looked around, it was a dark night, I could hear some hissing coming out of the car. And then I tried to get out of the car. And I realized that I couldn't move anymore. My fingers weren't working anymore, and I couldn't hold the door handle to open it. And then I rested my hand back on my leg, and I realized that I could no longer feel my leg. And that's when I knew one of the worst things that can happen to a person has happened. That I had a spinal cord injury, and that I was paralyzed from the chest down. I cannot begin to tell you what that feels like, to realize that life has changed forever within seconds. I was a medical student at the time, so I was now the patient, and I ended up in the hospital after a quick trip in the ambulance. To share an interesting story about being in the ambulance that night, and something that Kumar said earlier as well, which is to be good to each other. When I looked up in the ambulance, I saw a familiar face, and it was actually a doctor that had given me a lecture a few months beforehand. He lectured me about emergency medicine, and I remember that lecture so well because it sparked an interest in emergency medicine in me, and I thought that that was something I wanted to do for a career. And actually today, I work in Australia's busiest emergency department at the Gold Coast University Hospital, so I followed that through. But the thing that doctor taught me in the ambulance was nothing about medicine. The thing that he taught me is that it only takes a few seconds for us to touch someone's life, and to touch it in a way that we might remember it for years to come, and to touch it in a way that in a whole city away, they might share it with a bunch of people in a room in a town hall. Because that night, I don't remember any of the medical things that he did for me. I don't remember the drugs that he gave, the procedures that he did, or any of the technical details. But I remember how he made me feel. I remember the words that he said to me, and I remember that I felt safe, and I remember that I felt hopeful. So people may not remember what we do for them, but they will always remember how we make them feel. And that is the opportunity that each and every one of us in this room have today, with the work that we do, with the people that we help, and the lives that we touch. I ended up in a hospital in the intensive care unit on a ventilator after a surgery. It took me weeks to be able to speak a full sentence, to be able to breathe on my own, to be able to sit, to maintain my own blood pressure. It took weeks for me to be able to sit, to be able to eat, to be able to move my arms. I was in the hospital for 8 months. The devastation that happens to someone's life after a trauma like this goes far beyond the visible physical things. Right now, you see me sitting on a wheelchair, the inability to walk. Someone might not even realize that I can't use my fingers. But underneath the surface, my blood pressure drops all the time. I can't control my body temperature. I can't breathe properly. My lung function is about 35% of what's expected for someone of my characteristics. And then there are the social effects. We had to sell the family home. My mum and dad split up. We had no money. We were in so much debt from all the costs that a disability brings with it. Access to the community became difficult. Education and employment. It was all really challenging. There were days when me and my mum didn't know where we were going to live the next day, when we didn't have a cent in the bank, where we didn't have any belongings, and we were just trying to live day to day. But you gotta never lose hope. Hope is everything. Hope for a better tomorrow. Hope for a better future. Hope is actually the reason why many of us are in this room today. So we kept our hope, and we chose never to give up. I talked about how you can leave a mark on someone's life. Well, when I was in the hospital, a lot of my ex-girlfriends turned up to visit, and there was one in particular that did something really nice for me, and she hung up the poem Invictus by my bedside. So every day when I went to sleep and every morning when I woke up, I saw the poem Invictus. Invictus means undefeated or invincible. And in the poem, it talks about a man going through some hard things, but he says that no matter how bloody his head gets with the blows of nature, he will not bow down, and that he is the master of his fate and the captain of his soul. So I chose never to bow down. I chose to be the master of my fate and the captain of my soul. And I kept going, and I kept chasing the dream of finishing medical school and becoming a doctor. 4 years after I was discharged from the hospital, my mum and I got to a point where I could have another crack at medical school. And so I came back, and every day I put everything that I had into it. I woke up at 3 a.m. I got to the hospital, and then I went to the library, stayed up till about 11:30 p.m., slept for a couple hours, repeat. I did that 6 days a week for as long as it took me to finish medical school. Eventually, I graduated. A lot of people told me that I couldn't be a doctor. A lot of people told me that I couldn't work as a doctor. But again, I chose to be the master of my fate, not listen to them, and fought. Today, I'm in my 6th year as a doctor, working in Australia's busiest emergency department. Someone with quadriplegia, something they thought would be never possible. But here's another reason why I think all of us sit in this room together and share some similar ideas. And I think one of those ideas is that we don't take the world for how it is today, but we dream about the world for how it should be tomorrow. And all these ideas that we support and all these people that we support are changing this world to build a better tomorrow for all of us. And these are some of the things that are at the heart of entrepreneurship, isn't it? It's about coming through hardship. It's about persistence. It's about resilience. It's about not taking no for an answer. It's about seeing the world for how it should be and dreaming of a better tomorrow. That's why I was really excited to come and share some time with you this evening and to share some of my thoughts and my journey about how I got here. But in amongst all of this, I'm incredibly grateful for the life that I've had, and I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunities that I've had. And every single day, I wake up being thankful to be alive. So thank you so much for supporting this work. Thank you so much for supporting these people. And even if we have one idea striking a chord, and even if you have one idea finding success, that could be the idea that makes a better world for all of us. Thank you.